please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Hi, today we're going to do a TED Talk because I'm a little bit irked by something I have seen. I've seen it doing its rounds on Twitter to the point Games Workshop and Space Marines and Custodes, female Space Marines and various other iterations have been trending. It is irritating to me and obviously I have a vested interest. My name after all is derived from the book Legion. I have been a religious, devout follower, collector, painter since I was 10 years old. I've told this story in other videos in the past. I'll link one or two down below if you'd like. One army I had collected a few years ago to get back into painting were Custodes, and I was so excited to paint them. And they've turned out quite well. Perhaps I'll share a picture on Instagram at some point in the future. They turned out well because I have a bit of a gift when it comes to painting metals. Always have, been very good at it. It's just one of those things, right? We all have something we're good at, okay? Not a flex. Just a statement of everyone's good at something. I like the look of the Custodes. I love the canon for them, the lore, much of which is discussed in the Horus Heresy series and some other separate books like Valdor. During the Heresy series, you learn about what the Custodes are and how potent they can be. In the first Heretic, you find that Lorgar is such a weak Primarch, he can be taken out by only a few Custodes, something which Lorgar is all too familiar with. In a Custodes codex, you find that all the Custodes are sons from noble houses. Now, originally, the Emperor made a concerted effort to find very specific people. He needed certain very particular people. A lot of effort was made, for example, to obtain Ra and Constantin Valdor. In fact, they almost lost Valdor. They were vitally important to perform certain duties. I mentioned that they now come from houses, the noble houses of Terra, and they're all boys, because a recent update, which tickled me a little bit, has introduced female Custodes. Now, Custodes, the process to make a custodian canon, originally was derived from the idea of scientific merit. All Space Marines are male. All Primaris Space Marines are male. All the Primarchs are male. The Custodes, all male. There is a reason for that, because they all serve a purpose of war. Men, biologically, have a physical advantage. So it should come as no surprise then with the new updates that the Custodes are nowhere near as strong as they once were now that they've introduced female Custodes. That's a weird one. It's a very unusual change, but you know what? Why not retcon some of the interesting rules they used to have for Custodes that made them more unique? For example, they do not fight in formation or unit. They are individual weapons. Their sole purpose is to protect the Emperor. They are the best of the best. They are better than Primaris Marines. They don't suffer with any kind of gigantism to their hands, like Space Marines Adeptus Astartes especially. They have one heart, not two, can be stabbed in the heart and still function. They heal at a faster rate, they have better armor, better skills, better everything really. They're just superior. And the Venatari are awesome. If you know what they are, you know what I'm talking about. Essentially, the Custodes are the pinnacle, but the process to make them is harder than that of an Adeptus Astarte or a Primaris Marine. There was talk over the years because there are two missing Primarchs that maybe one of them was female, but we know for a fact one of them is dead and the other one was held in the Custodes' own prison cells and was released not so long ago. Of course, you can posit that perhaps number 11 that was hidden in those cells was in fact female. I believe the name Rubenek or Rubeken was doing its rounds for a while as a name for an unknown Primarch. Malcador pinned 4 Primarchs to the ground with his mind in canon because they wanted to say the names of the 2 Primarchs they're not allowed to speak of because they swore an oath to never repeat them. Magnus raged at Lorgar and destroyed the top of one of his towers for it. Well, teleporting out of it, it was made of glass after all, much like Lorgar's ego. The subject of female Space Marines has been going on for a long time. There are alternatives though. The Sisters of Battle for the Order Hereticus are awesome. They always have been. The penitent engines were brilliantly designed. The very concept, yes, I understand, a little bit over-sexualized, but they served a fantastic purpose of a female-led army. With the Custodes, you have the Sisters of Silence. Incredibly talented and very potent models. Warriors almost without peer. Better than any of the standard Imperial Guard. In fact, I'd argue one Sister of Silence could take out virtually any character from Imperial Guard canon. They are simply better, and they could stand tall easily with that of the Space Marines. They really can. Their rules are on their side. However, that is not enough for some people. You do have the Dark Eldar, a lot of female characters and models. The Eldar, of course, Howling Banshees, Jane Zar, so on. You have it with Tau with Commander Shadow Sun. Imperial Guard have them as well. Now you have Ursula Creed. But the Space Marines have always remained that one untouchable, unassailable group that have always been male. In canon, the Emperor had joked with Malkador about making a female Primarch and female Space Marines. But it never happened. There was a reason for that. It was a biological one. For example, what would the point be in making a female Space Marine or female Primarch? All the female aspects would be redundant. They can't procreate. They would have weaker bone density and muscle mass, requiring greater efforts to make them stronger or as strong as their male counterpart. When you apply this to the real world, I know you can't really have the two together. You see that for example, in America, some New York Fire Department and police departments had to lower the bar so that women could compete with the men and be able to be accepted. But in all walks of life, when emergency service or military, you want the best of the best of the best, and some will be female, but they will have earned their place. For 30 plus years, Games Workshop have created this canon, this very rich, contradictory canon, and the Space Marines were not something that could be touched. Back in the old days, they had made some metal female models when they were starting out. However, it was an entirely male fanbase and they didn't buy them. So over the years they did introduce female models in various places and various gaming styles. Necromunda example, House Escher of course. Superior House, Don't Try Me. However, males dominated and they still dominate. Some will buy the models, of course. I have some female models in various things. I think I've got a Primaris Psyker thing for Imperial Guard who looks somewhat female. The massive bald head though, you can never be too certain. Recently Games Workshop tweeted this out. Reply from Khan, Eater of Worlds. Why did you nerf the new Custodes? Why are female Custodes a thing now? Why retcon them in? Reply, in regards to female custodians, there have always been female custodians since the first of the 10,000 were created, which is a load of bollocks. It really is. Which is why in any canon, any place, any time, there has been no reference to that anywhere. That one tweet, that one sentence has pissed off so many people, so many. And then you see the rules and realize they're not joking, they really have made the changes. Undoubtedly there are some, like this individual, who are totally on the side of this because now female Custodes are cool and are welcomed. Fantastic. When you see some pounce on this and accuse the players gatekeeping or being misogynistic, you are overlooking the fact that while GW have all the intellectual property and they're all in charge of it, they can decide what they do with it. Many of us have been invested for so long. To change it means to create something new, and that annoys many of us. It annoys us because you are constantly undermining what has been written for decades and what has been created. You followed the market, and this time for some peculiar reason, you are attempting to pander to the vocal minority who don't even play or paint this. They don't read the material. They don't know anything about it. They just want inclusivity. Anything that's considered a male-dominated space has to be eroded at. And in this you have Space Marines that are males. All of them are. But what makes them male is kind of removed. So the exact same can then be said for females. So what is the bleeding point? If we base it on humanity as humanity is, then the science is not on your side and far too much effort has to be made to make them as good if not better than a male. Base it on the fact that you built an entire post-human military might on what was considered scientifically sound reasoning. To then undo that because it's also fantasy. Of course, a form of fantasy in the sci-fi realm. Over the Horus Heresy book series there was much in the way of contradiction and undermining of each author's works. It was exceedingly frustrating. Satisfying conclusion, but frustrating nonetheless. The consistency concerning the Space Marines is vital. You can make it seem like you're trying to appeal to everyone by being inclusive, but now you've opened the door, you now have no reason not to have female Space Marines. But how are you going to represent a female Space Marine? Beyond the head. The bodies are going to be the same. So what have you really done? Sod all. And for what reason? To pander to others who don't even play your game. Games Workshop, or Warhammer, you are objectively wrong about your own franchise. And it is not gatekeeping on us. It is not gatekeeping on our part that we find this quite erroneous and pointless when you have spent decades building it for one audience to then decide, but now we're at this point where we can diverge and include everyone else, which is totally fine, to make as much money as possible, which again I fully understand, making inferior quality models jacking up the price to an unreasonable area, and then deciding to crap on the canon that's been established for decades. The only reason you're slowly bleeding things like Primarchs back into this is because that makes more money, and I fully get it. Introducing female Custodes, the Guardians of the Emperor, is utterly redundant. Warhammer, in their infinite wisdom on Twitter, have started blocking any account. So if you want to get blocked by Warhammer, do the following. Mock them on Twitter. That's all you have to do. You are trying, Games Workshop, Warhammer, to put out the fire, I'm quoting Grums here, that they started when they tweeted that Custodes have always been females or always had females. Many others have started simply saying, right, well, I'm just going to start 3D printing them myself, my own models. What really lets Warhammer down is that they could have done some world building first. A few books, maybe teasing it over time. But no, they instead just throw it into 10th edition as if we're going to simply obey it. Many people stopped at 7th. I think I stopped at 5th playing. I couldn't be asked with anything afterwards. But I did like the models, for the most part. And I'm quite fond of the Solar Auxilia, for the Heresy that is. If you've seen them, they look pretty cool. Very steampunk. Many on social media have taken very firm stances. Of course they have. Twitter is cancerous for it. Some taking the stance that they're going to walk away. The Golden One put out a video on Twitter. You have Marshall Bohemond here. Understandably so. Others just saying you're a gatekeeper. How dare you be a gatekeeper? Because women and representation and LGBTQ+ and all this other bollocks. That in the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war, that totally matters. That sometimes randomly pops up in books I read for Games Workshop's content. They randomly insert a relationship or sexuality, and it's absolutely cringe because it just appears. There's no build up to it, it's just mentioned plop for a moment, and that's it. As if it's some kind of motivating factor. Some of your writers are dog shit, in case you didn't know. I'm going to read a tweet from the Golden One with his video included. I'm not going to play the video, of course. I can no longer endorse this heresy with my silence. Has the time come to say farewell to Games Workshop and Warhammer? The ever-increasing wokeness of the company has reached a critical point. Perhaps this was brought about by malicious actors within the company, or perhaps by sinister outside forces. I noticed that BlackRock is a shareholder in Games Workshop. I've been a fan for over 20 years, so it pains me greatly to see this development. I can imagine that it also pains many within GW to be bullied by external forces like this, to be forced to butcher their own lore, and to see their longtime fans leave in frustration. It cannot be easy for someone who actually likes the company and the hobby. I somewhat doubt that the ones pushing the woke agenda care about Warhammer and is all about a political message. I'm hoping for a redemption arc, but I'm probably hoping for too much in that regard. I'll link his video down below if you're interested. He actually makes some good points about the insidious nature of those who weave their way into companies to undo that company. The Heresy series set up so much about what it means for a Space Marine to be a Space Marine, and do in a number of other side books go into the process of the creation. Sigismund is a good start for that when he had his second heart implanted. You get much in the way of information, and it's existed for a long ass time. If you are now undoing that, you have basically made over 15 years worth of canon, establishing the canon especially, pointless. Which for many people who are invested in the playing, the painting, the community, and the reading, the novels, it's so aggravating because we invest so much time and money and effort into what you have built. But then this shouldn't be a surprise, should it? Let's not forget here, in 2003, 2004, you did the Storm of Chaos campaign, and the fans voted for Grimgor Ironhide of the Orcs to win, not Chaos. You wanted Chaos to win, but you let the audience decide. Skip ahead many, many years, and you decide the end times have to happen so you can create a brand new game called Age of Sigmar, which is mocked and bullied to high hell. The models look great, but wouldn't look out of place in the old world if you actually made the time to expand the old world. But instead, you force-fed us Age of Sigmar and have had to now create the old world again because it turns out the fans didn't want Age of Sigmar. Yet you continue to push it. And don't get me started on how dogshit your website is now, by the way. And your scalpers have ruined the book industry for us all. The idea of a female custody in one sentence has sent many off the deep end in anger at the fact that you couldn't even be asked to put that into canon years ago. But the reason you didn't is entirely because you knew it wouldn't resonate with your mostly male audience then, and it still doesn't resonate with your mostly male audience now. I'm part of that audience, but I paint on my own. I kind of do my own thing. I never bothered to get involved in your community because as an outsider looking at your community, most of them are right, but the insidious dog shit I see on a daily from those who think everyone else is a gatekeeper is beyond poisonous. It is unhealthy, and will lead to further division within your communities that you are intentionally trying to goad. You are trying to push out for a new audience. I don't expect a boycott in your future, because there's no bloody point, really. You only have to appease your shareholders. You don't have to listen to the fans, because you did once and decided 15 years later you didn't care. Hardly a surprise at this point. The only time I've ever known you to care is when you ballsed up someone's order online, and even then you still cock it up. Just before I conclude, I want to go through some of the replies to Warhammer's official Twitter. So where they have said there have always been female custodians, this could have been true if they were talking about the Sisters of Silence and hadn't finished the sentence with the first of the 10,000. Don't forget here, the Sisters of Silence originally operated on the Somna Citadel on Luna. Yes, I know my canon and lore. So, to some of the replies. Can you show us one instance of this? No, you came up with that just now and are getting dragged in comments by lore snippets, but do go on. Was just about to buy $300 of overpriced plastic, thank you for snapping me out of it. You as a corporation obviously never heard of the adage, if it be not broken, don't try to fix it. And if you have, it's clearly apparent you have made the conscious decision to blatantly disregard it. Source, Adeptus Custodes Codex, showing the infant sons of the noble houses of Terra. Warhammer is for everyone. Oh, the love. Oh, sod off. Wow, lots of people in replies proving Warhammer to be objectively wrong about their own franchise. Hilarious. Good luck Warhammer fans, you're about to get the treatment. Prepare to get called all kinds of things for liking your hobby the way it was meant to be and has been for ages. That's ridiculous, there's already several powerful female-centric factions. Don't be surprised in the near future if Trajan Valoris gets edged out in favour of a female chief custodian. Don't be surprised, because why bring back Constantin Valdor or the Yellow King? Why keep Trajan Valoris one of the greatest when you could actually push a further message? And don't forget here, when the Great Rift was formed, to make up for the original failure of the 13th Black Crusade, the old version anyway, Ursaka Creed had to be erased, taken to prison by the Necron dude whose name I've forgotten, the Infinite, is that him, the Collector? One of those guys, I don't give a shit at this point. And his daughter took his place, Ursula Creed. There is actually a book on her called Ashes of Cadia. I've read it, it's not bad. It really isn't bad. But as is often the case, they had to do a direct gender replacement. Don't be surprised if the Emperor suddenly becomes the Empress. Honestly, Malcador could be Malcadina. I took the liberty of thinking of names for each of the Primarchs in turn if they did female alternatives, and my favourite one I wrote down was for Angrom. She'd just be called Karen though. Not sure what to make of that. If you want the rest of those names, do let me know in the comments and I'll happily share them. Continuing with the tweets. Why do you offend your customers' intelligence so transparently and contemptibly? Yes, with such easily disprovable lies? Custodes were clearly too pale, male and stale of a heroic ideal for an overwhelmingly straight male conservative white fanbase to be allowed to continue. Wait, what? Okay, I understood that eventually. GW must need a loan from BlackRock. Would you look at that? Genuine question for Warhammer fans. Coming from someone who hasn't touched the series, what's the problem with female custodians? Is there a reason for why they shouldn't? I've been watching debates and honestly I don't know what the f is going on. I would like to believe I have somehow addressed this, although I would point out to the Ravenger, yep, you clearly weren't paying attention to the fact that many within the replies to this have debunked everything. And because GW are so willing to ban you, block you, gaslight you, which they have been doing for years, don't be surprised that they are going to retcon their intellectual property because they're very protective of it, which is somewhat ironic, considering on a whim they are willing to snap their finger like Q and just change it because. I do apologise for the nature of this TED Talk, but I have grown quite irritated because of this, and there is a lot more to it. There really is, but I'm not entirely sure I can sit here and go through all of it, because it turns out as much as I love to talk about Warhammer, when it comes to making videos on it, I suddenly go blank, like a Sister of Silence, I guess.